Okay, I'd like to introduce Alfredo Capote from the Tec de Monterrey in Mexico City. He is also Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for IBM Latin America. Okay, Alfredo, please.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be in this very important event, and I want to give thanks for the invitation from the London Schools of Economics. Let me change gears here, since I'm not an academic. I do work in a university part-time. I head a center that we call the E-Business Applied Research Center, and this research center is focusing in the transformation that it's currently being done to the society and to the businesses because of information technology. So my presentation is going to be focusing in two things. First of all, what is the meaning of information technology in terms of transformation? And secondly, I will pose two very simple questions in the ethics area. All right? If you take a look to the information technology development, you will find out that there are three main trends or tendencies that could define the whole transformation. First of all, there is now a world which is being defined as all connected. Let me try to define that a little bit better. If you take a look, there are actually probably 6.2 billion people right now in the world. And if you take into account the PDAs, the personal devices, the cell phones, and the special communications devices, you will find out that by the year 2005, there's going to be 1.5 billion people connected, which means that you're going to be able to send and receive information. If you take a look to the phenomena of communications, then you will understand that these things will continue in that direction, and by the end of, I would say, the 10 or 15 first years of this century, you will find out that half of the people is going to be connected, some way or the other. This is including the development and the developed countries. So this is a major development and phenomenon. The second thing that we should keep an eye on is what I call the digital replace. If you take a look to the development of the society, you will find out that the society has been based their developments in physical things. Agriculture, production of goods and services, the Industrial Revolution, the so-called post-industrial era, and at the end of the day, what you have in there is that there is now a new trend and direction called the knowledge era, which is very related to the digital era, which means that everything is information. Information comes from data, who becomes information, and finally, that information could be the so-called knowledge and the so-called knowledge management phenomena. If you take a look to the value of the people today, you and I, there is more value in terms of the knowledge than in terms of any physical related thing. If you take a look to a business or to an organization, you will find out exactly the same phenomenon. If you take a look to the valuation of companies these days, you will find out that between 60 to 70% of the value of an organization is related not to the assets of the organization, but to the knowledge that that organization happens to have of their clients, customers, markets, technology, and working principles. If you take a look to the 10 most important organizations these days in the world, you will find out that if you sum up all the assets, you will get to less than 50% of the value of those corporations. It is exactly, I posed the first question to you. Is that the same thing happening to the people? That is more important what you know than what you are going to be able to do or understand? Let me leave it there for a moment. Now, if you put all that things, I will post to you that the information technology is transforming every single thing that we do in our lives. Of course, the new trends and directions are all related to this kind of a thing. I put in this chart a certain kind of a summary of all the things that are happening right now in the technology area, business area, markets, and customers. Let me just, I don't have time to go through the whole thing, but yet let me mention two things. Technology. If you take a look to the technology and the application of information technology, you will find out that there is an evolution and a constant development of new things. If you take a look to 15 years ago or 25 years ago, you wouldn't believe what you have in here. Let me just recall to you that the so-called internet era began less than 10 years ago. So the constant evolution and the speed of that evolution is changing every single dimension related to all the things. Second thing that I want to focus in is the customers. We as customers are now much more sophisticated and, more importantly, much more demanding. So the businesses, the organizations, the institutions will have to change to cope with that kind of a demand. If you don't do that, I would put a question mark in the sustainability of that particular institution or that particular organization. Now, is the internet phenomena a certain kind of a fashionable thing? If you think a little bit, besides all the bubble and the hype of the so-called dot-com companies, and we take a closer look to this technological phenomena, you will find out that the internet phenomena is a phenomena of communication and collaboration. Take it out all the technology hype things, and you will find out that it's incredible the amount of communications that you can do with this kind of a tool. And of course, the challenges that this kind of a communication capabilities pose to the organization, to the people, and to the world. If you take a look to whatever parameter you want to take, let me call your attention to the upper part of the chart. Currently, this year, probably, there is going to be an interchange of goods and services of over $3 trillion, US dollars. This you would say, look, this is a lot of figures, and it's a very big figure. But let me put in this context. The largest single industry in the world today is the automotive industry. The automotive industry is $2.8 trillion. So the interchange of goods and services going on right now are more than the biggest industry that we know. By the way, the biggest industry is going to be the electronic industry in the next 2 years. Because if you take a look to the automotive industry, you will find out that 45% of the cost of a car these days is related to electronics. And probably in the next 2-3 years, there's going to be 65% of the cost based on electronics and less than 40% in the rest of the materials. So there is a big change going on right now. Then there is another trend which is very important, which is how penetrated is this phenomena in the different countries. You can take a look to the major countries over there, and you will find out that we have a penetration in the range of between 30 to 40%, meaning that between 30 to 40% of the people in those countries happens to have access to this kind of a tool. If you take a look to the development countries, you will find out exactly the same thing, but in a different context. Penetration, of course, is going to be between 5 to 10%, but the growth, it's phenomenal. So at the end of the next 20 years, the experts in this area mention that the world is going to be penetrated probably in the range of 35 to 40% within this context. Now, having said that, I would like to come into my country's case, which is a typical development country. Yes, Mexico happens to have in the range of 100 million people, but you will find out that 10 million people now, it's some way or the other using this kind of tools. And you would say, well, this is a 10% penetration. It's very low. It is low. But if you take into account that in my country, there are 30 million people who are economically active, you will find out that the penetration is much more than 10%, which is actually 30%. So of course, the challenge that we have in these kind of countries like Mexico is how we can get more people to this kind of an evolution. And of course, the education-related issues and the infrastructure issues and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the phenomena, it's valid in a development country and in a so-called major country. What is happening to the organizations? Is this a problem which is dealing only with the persons, or this is a problem and a phenomena which is also dealing with corporations? Well, the answer I tried to summarize in this particular chart in here, and you will say, you can see in the left side of the chart that more than 70–80% of the corporations are now reshaping themselves because of this problem. I said problem and I said opportunity. And if you take to the right side of the chart, you will see that probably e-commerce is, I would say, a pervasive kind of a phenomena. The internet purchasing, it's also very pervasive. And now I would say there is a new, evolution of new opportunities and new things called the business-to-business marketplace, which means the interchange of goods and services between organizations and institutions. And so what I'm trying to say here is that there is a change also in the corporations going on right now. Also, you can see in here that all the people are applying this kind of a thing to the major things that they are doing. There are three major areas going on right now in terms of the applications of these kind of tools. The so-called supply chain management, the so-called customer relationship management, and the so-called production-related kind of things. And if you take a look at what's going on right now, you will see that in terms of expenditures in every single area, you can say that this, I would say, trend will continue in the near future. What is interesting is that up to 80% of the spend is in mission-critical direct goods and supplies, which means that people are dealing with the exceptional cases that they have in order to cope with the opportunities that you have, especially in the supply chain and integrated totally with the so-called, I would say, demand tools or demand relationships that you could have. The ultimate model in this kind of a thing is a direct connection between the market, the customer, the production, and the suppliers. And if you can take a look to what is happening today, there are many companies who are now moving into this kind of a situation, which implies that you have to change the production systems, you have to change the distribution systems, you have to change the way you handle the suppliers, and you have to change the way you handle the assets and the financials of the company. This is not a trivial thing. And if you take a look again in an additional dimension of the thing, it's a problem of death or life in a corporation. Because you can be applying the financials of this phenomena in such a way that if you do with this kind of tools, you are going to be able to be much more productive than your competitor, which is not dealing with this kind of tools. So evolution is there. What is going to be in the future? And if you take a look to all the new technologies, and this is a way to represent the evolution of the different technologies that has been applied in this space in the marketplace, I mean the internet space, you will find out that at the beginning of the so-called internet era, there was a lot of emphasis in the infrastructure. Then you move away from the infrastructure to the so-called added value kind of things. And at this point of time, of course, the evolution is within the so-called broadband and wireless phenomena. By the way, if you take a look to these two phenomena in Europe, it's a very interesting example. Today in Europe, you used in the range between 20 to 25 million messages per day in the major countries. 25 millions. Just in Spain, which is one of the most advanced markets in terms of the utilization of mobile technology related to messages, there are 5 million messages being sent every single day. I cannot tell you if those messages are related to commercial things, to personal things, or to communications in general. But the fact of the matter is that those communications are there. And the people who are going to be willing to use that communications as an opportunity and a way to do things in a different way are going to be much more better positioned than the ones who are not wanting to do that kind of a thing. So the technologies has an evolution, and you can find that there is a typical path in the technology that you have the so-called hype part of the utilization of the technology, the so-called evolution of that technology, and finally the utilization of the technology in the right way. When people think about the internet and thinks about this evolution, I don't see that the people understand what's going on behind all those things. This is a representation, a quick representation of all the things that you have. And I put it there in a very simple way. The internet protocol, the way to communicate within the internet infrastructure, is much more than just basic voice. Because people's tendency is to say, look, the communications ability of an organization or a human being, it's related to the voice. It could be a written voice, it could be a written communications, or it could be a representation of the voice. But if you take a look of the possibilities that you have in terms of the application of this evolution of tools and new things, you will find out that there are just more than just the basic voice. And if you take a look also to the evolution in terms of time, market needs, you will have the so-called added value kind of an applications in the right-hand side. And in this axle, in the left axle, you can see that there are higher value revenues and technologies who are propelling this kind of revolution within the internet. I don't have time to go in details to these kind of things, but you can take a feeling of what's going on. Now, this is a model that we have developed at Monterrey Tech in Mexico, trying to explain what is the so-called e-transformation process. And it's very simple. you can see that the e-transformation process is related to 4 major things represented by the circles that you have in there and their intersections. First of all, you have the relationship with customers and markets, which means the customer relationship management. There has been a lot of things written and been developed in the so-called CRM side of the equation. But the problem here that I want to some way or the other explain to you is that now the company is able to communicate to every single customer. That posed a terrific opportunity, but also a terrific, I would say, problem. Because now you have to be able to understand how you're going to communicate with those thousands or millions of customers. Think about this in a bank, in a telephone company, in a utility, in a commercial entity, in whatever you might think. In the other side, there is also a transformation going on in the suppliers. The suppliers means that today you will find out that all the things that you used to do in a so-called vertical integrated company, the companies and the corporations are not doing that anymore. I read the other day that a Ford Motor Company is going to outsource 80% of the manufacturing to the so-called manufacturing contractors. If you take the new X3, which is the new SUV produced by BMW, that vehicle is going to be produced in Austria by a manufacturing contractor. Is that a BMW or that is not a BMW? If you take a look to the, my industry, the electronic industry, you will find out that 85% of all the goods and services are being produced outside the, I would say, typical main organizations. In IBM today, 87% of the production is being done by outside contractors. The question here is that you are now able to do those kind of things because of the communications tools, which is the internet. So the ability to some way or the other enable the communications facilities that you have today available are now some way or the other being the driving force for this kind of a relationship. And finally, I would tell you that what you have in here, there are 3 basic, I would say, foundations. The first foundation, as I call it, is the collaboration. Collaboration means that you do things with other people. Communications, you communicate. Collaborate means that you do activities with other people through this kind of a mechanism. Of course, the so-called business intelligence, which I alluded a little bit earlier as the knowledge management kind of things, business intelligence is the, I would say, ability to understand the transactions that you do with your markets and your customers and translate those transactions into business knowledge. For instance, in a bank, the largest database in financial services in the world happens to be the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York database. 37 million customers. Think about this. If you put in that bank and insert in your account statement, costing in a range of 20 cents, you have to multiply 20 cents dollars by almost 30 million. That's a lot of money. And that insert probably is going to address a particular requirement which is going to be related to less than 5% of your customer base. So business intelligence is the ability to relate the transactions that you have in one customer with the needs and the ability to some way or the other communicate within that kind of a thing. So what I'm trying to say here is that you could do a difference if you apply these kinds of a technology to every single thing that you do in your lives. And finally, the so-called knowledge management, which is the meaning of the application of all this knowledge that you extract from the transactions, the collaborations, the interaction, and the communications that you do among the different, I would say, communities or people or suppliers or customers, or in general, whatever you do in your company in these kind of terms. Now, the transformation model, and I go very fast here, deals with all the different things that you have to do in order to understand your company, your organization, your institutions in 3 dimensions: the human resources, the organizational structure, and the technology that you used. And really, the transformation model means that you apply integration of all these technologies, you do collaboration and coordination, you do the transactions, you do the information storage, you create the knowledge, you manage that knowledge, and finally you get into more competitiveness and efficiency opportunities within this kind of a context. So what I'm saying here this, in very few words is that there is a drive to use this kind of tools because you get to better productivity and you get to better efficiency within the organizations. There is an interesting statistics from the Labor Bureau in the US that in the last 15 years, the US has been able to continue increasing the productivity in a range between 2.5 to 3.5% per year, probably 80% related to the application of information technology. And you can prove that if you go through the economics of this particular phenomena. So the so-called enterprise or institutional transformation is being driven by the effectiveness that you can achieve using this kind of the tools or tools. Now, what is in the future? The future here, according to all the people who has been studying this, is an evolution for the so-called communications that you do with the people in terms of transactions to a new kind of dimension, which is called the cooperative commerce or cooperative interaction. Cooperative means that you can do things specifically with the people that you deal with, institutions or organizations. And this collaborative interaction is much more important than the typical departmental productivity that you do in the pre-1995. I'm putting 1995 as the launched year for the so-called internet era. Then you get into the external transaction, which was the base of the so-called electronic commerce, to a new kind of a development called the collaborative commerce, which is the interaction, the intelligent interaction between the different people that you have within a particular market or a customer community. This, of course, will get you higher customer expectations, will be complex trading networks, dynamic business relationships, and the potential partnering with different companies. Now, in terms of applications, you will find out that the value of collaborative commerce is to open new markets, accelerate time to market, and dramatically improve earnings, which, by the way, are being created specifically by the new value created for business partners. Business partners means the people that you work with as suppliers or distributors in the value chain of your company. Now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because the transformation are going to be with us, and it's going to be in all related things that we do, meaning that all industries are going to be transformed within this kind of a model. There is no industry and no activity in the commercial world or in the productive world that we will find out that is not going to be changed. I use this kind of a representation, which I think it's very good, because you can, in the left-hand side, you can see that the typical, I would say, mass production industry or non-digital, the physics, the one who deals with the physics things, like the agriculture, you produce an apple, but you don't know that apple work is going to be ended. And you don't care. Exactly in the opposite framework, you will find out that in education, like in LSE, you have to know exactly what people are dealing with and what they are doing in order to be able to extend a certificate, a diploma, or anything. So what you have in here is that there is going to be much more transformation in the industries to the right than in the industry to the left, but at the end of the day, there is going to be transformation in the whole industries, which means that this phenomena is going to be, some way or the other, very pervasive all over what we're talking about. Now, what is the drive of this transformation? There has been a number of discussions in this area. I put it in a very simple way. If you take a look to the macroeconomics of the different countries, and I pick it up, Mexico's and Brazil, the two biggest economies in Latin America, of course, United Kingdom, because we are here, and USA. And what you will find out in there is that there is a relationship between the competitiveness and the growth to the investment that you do in the so-called ICT. ICT means information and communications technology. And you will find out that the ICT index of the so-called World Economic Forum is in such a way that the United Kingdom, for instance, is number 14 in 2002, which is not published yet. Probably the United Kingdom is going to gain probably 5 or 6 places. And the US is in number 4, and it's going to be probably in the number 2, by the way, in the next reports. But what I'm trying to put in here is that there is a certain relationship within the ICT investment and the progress of the different economies. And secondly, you will find out, according to World Bank information, that the GDP growth, even the growth in the GDP area, is related also to the so-called investment in ICT. And you will find out, for instance, in the period of 1995 and the period of 2001, the period 1990 to 95, 1995 to 2000 in all the different countries, you will find out that there has been this kind of the GDP growth. And if you relate that to the investment in the so-called ICT, you will find out that there is a lot of relationships between the ICT investment and the development of the particular economy. There are now a number of studies going on right now trying to relate this kind of a thing, but the most important study, it's been done in the US. And if you take a look to the last 25 years, you will find out that there is a perfect relationship between the ICT investment and the competitiveness of the country. So when I'm saying this because there is a driver here which is driving also a transformation. This is a case, by the way, of Mexico, and you take a look to all the numbers, you can take a look at your notes in there, you will find out exactly the same kind of a thing. Even though that in Mexico we do have a problem because, yes, we have 3.9% of penetration of ICT investment versus GDP, but probably 3.7 is related to communications. There has been an incredible investment in communications because of the needs of infrastructure that we do have in our countries in the last 10 years. So we have to some way or the other, speed up the pace here in order to really deal with investment not only in the communications area, but also in the information technology. Nevertheless, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a driving force in the transformation which is related to the competitiveness of the countries, competitiveness of the different industries, and the ability to really continue the growth in these particular areas. Now, this kind of speed in change, this kind of a transformation, this kind of a new challenge that we have in here, it's creating knowledge, collaboration opportunities, new roles, and information value. Is this challenging the ethics? Well, let me define a little bit what I'm meaning with this. Is there the possibility or potential for a cyber ethics? And what I mean with that is ethics, first of all, is the principles and standards of moral behavior. Secondly, implies periods of contemplation and deliberation and working through what I call a moral calculus. But that needs time. That needs the ability to think. And is that valid in the e-transformation era? When you have hundreds of interactions going on every single day? When you have a communication tool which is enabling the possibility of having 1.5 billion people interacting in the next 3 to 4 years? How are you going to cope with that? I don't know the answer, but I can tell you, the only way to maintain and sustain momentum in terms of the development of the world, the human being, the institutions, and the company are to have a very good foundation of the so-called values that we have in the ethics. If we don't have that, after 37 years working in the business environment, I can tell you we have nothing. The problem is that everything is changing. Are we changing the different things that we need in order to cope with this? I'm a positive person, so I would say yes. But we have to understand that now the complexity of this change is so much in terms of the speed and the ability to communicate and collaborate. Remember, there is a very important, I would say, difference between communications and collaboration. Collaboration means that you do things. Communications means that you communicate things. And I would post the question that the new ethics that I define it as the cyber ethics has to be related to this kind of a thing. My answer is yes, e-transformation is a big transformation for the human beings, but they're posing a big opportunity for the human being. Conclusions. E-transformation surfaced ethical dilemmas in many areas. I'm not an expert in this area or in many areas, but I would like to post this to your thinking. The internet ability to reach millions of people combined with this protective cloak of anonymity is changing totally the principles that we're based on. Think about it. You can send an information in the internet today. It can reach millions or billions of people. They don't even know who is sending the information. And thirdly, the productivity gains will continue to foster the information technology and communications usage. So if we're saying, no, this is a matter of a change that is happening right now but won't be a problem in the future, it is, in my opinion, absolutely wrong. The productivity gains will continue to foster this. The improvement in technology will continue to foster this. The improvement in collaboration will continue to foster this. So we have to think in a very different way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.